gentlemen. And I know that when we were actually tweeting during the week about this, somebody asked you to bring gifts. So is the wine is that your gift to the audience here today?
Lot, thank you. I have 2 glasses. First up here.
So
to it.
when we were speaking upstairs a little bit earlier on, we were saying that you've done an incredible job scrubbing the internet of all your previous misdemeanors and crimes and everything else.
What's that Google thing, that the right to be
not forgotten?
Known? That was it. Luckily for us.
You've done it. But I suppose, first of all, the best thing to do is to tell us how you guys actually came to write together, George.
So Rick and I were kind of doing the same thing in Dorset, and we got drunk one night, and I was after some free mixes because he's an amazing mix engineer, and he was after a studio property because my family are in property, and we decided that we were both trying to do the same thing, very close to each other, so why not sort of join forces and try and do it together.
So geographically, you were close by, and it made sense and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we were. Well, how close were we? 10 miles.
A few miles, yeah. No, but I think that it's one of those things that if it had been a marriage, our parents would definitely have not approved. But fortunately, it worked out.
We were about to, both of us, without knowing actually, we were about to quit. We were both about to give it up because we'd been trying for a long time and it hadn't really happened. And that was the thing I was saying upstairs. I think without actually knowing it, we needed each other.
Jesus, this is getting emotional a lot earlier than we normally have.
I will cry.
Yeah, don't tell his wife.
But you guys you've got an emotional connection. You wear similar clothes. You've been there. You've said that.
Well, do we? I haven't noticed. What shoes?
I have to. The boys were telling me a story earlier on of showing up to a. It was when
we signed our publishing deal.
Yeah, a big meeting.
And I turned up to the studio to see Rick wearing identically what I was wearing. And I was like, it's not good, mate. We've got dark green jacket and dark blue jeans and a white shirt. And we turned up to the publishers, and our manager turned up, and he was wearing a dark green jacket, dark blue trousers, and a white shirt. We walked in. I'm not allowed to. Am I allowed to swear?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, there's.
And our publisher, now publisher, walked in. Well, you some kind of fucking boy band, are you?
But like. That was boy bands. Just to be clear, it's not in your background. That wasn't where you began.
No, he won't find it either.
Okay, because we've been looking for those incredible. Rick, what about yourself? Obviously, you met this man, and as he mentioned, you were close to quitting, and I kind of said earlier on as well, like a lot of people feel that way. Like they have there's people in the room that have felt that way this week.
Yeah, I think the thing is with music is it is really very lonely. Because when you're doing it on your own, you've got no foil, you've got no kind of checks on your ideas, no one to edit, no one to help you kind of like pull you through the rough times, no one to celebrate the good times with, really, because it is no one really understands it. And I think that personally I've been producing records for quite a while, but I was feeling a bit lost. I'd been quite fortunate in one sense, in that some of my productions had done quite well, so I sort of was in one way sort of at quite a good level, and things on the outside would have seemed quite good, but I was really lost. I didn't know where to take the business. I didn't really know. Music was changing a lot as well. Production fees were sort of plummeting, and it seemed like gigs were kind of thin on the ground, and I just didn't really know what I was going to do. And when I met George, and he was like, "We should do this together," I was like, "You know what? That's a good idea. Let's try that." And it worked.
So you said 2009 was the year where you kind of first had that meeting, but your credits, if I put you into Wikipedia, you're there. You haven't scrubbed that one, all right?
They tried to get rid of us. We do exist.
12 is the first sort of major label cut.
Yeah, I mean.
What were the 3 years there? Were you just writing, recording, trying to make contacts, trying to find people to write with?
We were producing. Basically, we can track everything that's ever happened to us back to one band, which no one will have heard of, possibly may have heard of, called 2020, which was this little rock band that was signed to Geffen, that we did quite a few bits on their album. and you can literally pretty much track anything we've done back to them. So the contacts we've made go back to them. And we were producing predominantly to begin with. We were sort of writing as a hobby, but we weren't writing because we didn't think we were good enough. And we wrote a track which basically somehow made its way to Simon Cowell, who we saw an email from Simon, which was, you know, not mentioning us by name, probably had no idea who we were, but saying, I love this track, I want to cut it for 1D at the time for their first album. They didn't cut it. But that sort of told us that maybe the writing, maybe we could do it.
So had you day jobs as well? Like, were you doing this on evenings and weekends, as many people do?
I was playing covers. I was playing covers in
covers
restaurants.
band, okay.
Yeah, which, with my sister before, because we were sort of developing her. My sister's a signed artist in America, and Rick and I, we were kind of developing her sound back in those days, weren't we? But obviously there wasn't.
But it was, I think those 3 years actually, you know, 2009 to 2012, we do it all the time when we're looking for other producers, because, you know, it's interesting to see what other people have done and what their journey's been. And quite often you'll see with Wikipedia in particular, you look at a discography and there'll be nothing, and then bang, it's like people suddenly appear. And they don't suddenly appear. It, like, all of the stuff that happened in 2012 or whatever happened in those years before, and I think that those years when you're grafting away but you know, songs aren't coming out, and it's really frustrating. You'll think you've got a song on hold, and then the act will get dropped, or, you know, it's all that kind of stuff. But that spade work that you do over those years, that's really the hard yards, you know, because that's what kind of gets you to hone your craft. It makes you it toughens you up a bit as well. It makes you resilient to the knockbacks, because there's so many knockbacks and things.
What do people say when, like, do you get like songs rejected because, and do people feedback? What do they say? Like, what was your feedback that you learned from?
What specifically?
Do you remember an email or somebody that said, "Look at guys, this isn't working because"?
I don't know. You've got like a photographic memory, so I'm not very good.
No,
at
I
this.
don't think it's any one specific feedback. I mean, actually, like a guy who managed Sandy Tom, whose album I produced, and that was what kind of got me into the production game, said to me, at the time I was in a band and I was trying to do my band thing. Production was like very much a sideline thing. It's something I did to. It was my day job. It's what I did to bring in money to fund the band. And he said to me, work on your craft, work on your, just in the context of my band and my own songwriting. And that's something that really has stuck with me. And I think that it's really hard to pinpoint one thing, but as you get things knocked back, you know, you suddenly realize what parts are working, what parts aren't. You know, I think with it's difficult. It's an attritional process, but the rejections and knockbacks are as important as the successes, but more important, I think.
We'll get down to the nitty gritty and some of the specifics of the craft, as you've just mentioned. But one more general question, which was, what would you consider like the break? Was it Union J? Was it the Tonight track, or was it Little Mix Boy, or what was the moment you kind of went, Jesus, we're actually in here. We're plugged in.
The first one that happened was The Lovable Rose. I don't know if anyone remembers The Lovable Rose. We got that single, and I can still, because we basically worked with them before they went on Britain's Got Talent. And they went on Britain's Got Talent, and then they didn't really work with us, you know. After that, they went and did the rounds, which is what everybody does. But I still remember the time that we found out they were going to sing our song on the final of Britain's Got Talent, and it was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable! Like, our song, like, we're a couple of idiots from Dorset, and this is going to 14 million people are going to hear.
And also finding out that we had the first single, that was like a big deal, because it was the first. You know, we'd had successes in production, but it was our first kind of like co-write, and it was our first like major label. We'd had a cut with Alexandra Burke, but it wasn't. That was a bit different. It was an album cut, and it never felt like it was gonna.
But she was a name, like she was the first big, like, wow, there's a name. We're in, like, you know. I mean, we're like, there feels like there's different circles, like, and you get through one sort of security level, and then you're up to the next security level. Like
It
Alexandra
is.
Burke must have been another level up.
But
It's
the Love
exactly
of a Rose,
that.
I think, is like that's a really interesting case because exactly as George said, for me that was like, oh, I think we might be kind of doing something good here. Like we're working for Psycho, and we're sending them songs, and they're saying they love them, and
Replying.
well, but that kind of thing. But then Love of a Rose ultimately went on to get dropped, and it was one of those massive disappointments.
Yeah,
At the same time, it's really bittersweet because you put so much into these projects. You get really close to the guys or girls that you're working with. You kind of have to, and you feel their pain, the ups and downs, and when it's just as painful for us when things don't work out as it is for the artist, and so I think that the Love of a Rose, that's a really interesting one because it felt amazing, when things were on the up, and it was so sad when it didn't work out.
We always say that because there's two of us, it makes the better times better, and it makes the bad times more manageable, and it's that having two people, because you'd share the certainly the bad times, you share it, and you don't be so stupid.
It's interesting. It's interesting to hear you talk about like really feeling for the artist when, because it happens, like especially when it's Psycho and the guys are putting a lot of people up there for massive public consumption. Like just look at X Factor this year, you see the huge exposure that so many acts are getting. And I wonder, will we know Andrea Faustini or Fleur East or whoever it is, clearly talented people, clearly talented musicians, but many of these will fall by the wayside, It's interesting, like what from the outside, and yet also as part of the machine, if you like, if you don't mind me saying that. Like, what's your attitude towards this conveyor belt, or do you feel like it's a good way to produce music? That's a very big question, very early in the interview.
It's a massive question, but it's a really good question. I think that there are obviously really bad aspects of the conveyor belt because when people fall off it, you feel for them, and it's really, really tough, and in many ways it's quite brutal because you can't be doing sessions with people that whose careers aren't sort of going to take you anywhere, and that's really, really hard because you're personally friends with people, and that's difficult. But in the other sense, it's a business, like just like any other business, and I think that's one of the really hard things to deal with music because it's so emotional and so personal, and so you have to put so much stuff that's not very business-like into it. It's really hard to think of it then, okay, well, it's just a product and we've just got to,
well,
it's difficult.
Well, do you watch X Factor and think, Stereo Kicks, we could write for them? I actually have a song that's going to work for them.
Yeah, we've got some quite good, do you say you do?
Not me, I'm asking you. I'm putting myself into your shoes. An interviewing technique that I've used.
I've done it a couple of years now where our management are quite close to the machine, as it were, and I've seen somebody come on that I don't know, something triggers inside you, and I've texted the management saying, "Got to set that session up. Like, let's do that. Let's work with them."
Because you've done Union J, you've done 5 Seconds of Summer, you've done One Direction. You clearly have you've got like a songwriting that suits boy bands. Like, is that too general a sort of assumption or
I
thing
don't
to
know.
say?
That's a tough one. I mean, yeah, I don't know if we would suit boy bands, but I think we write when a good song's a good song. And we're lucky enough to have written a good song that day, and that person sings it. Then yeah, I mean, yeah, because Five Sus, I wouldn't describe them as a boy band personally. I think that they are, having been in a room with them and seen them write, they are. I don't think they would describe themselves as a boy band. I think they're a band. And so when we're writing with them, we never had a track which we've written that they then took, if that makes sense. They've been part of it, so they've actually cultivated it with us.
The only thing I would say about the boy band thing is I don't think there's much difference between and I don't mean this to sort of sound facetious, but I don't think there's much difference between a boy band track and any other pop song. I think they, you know, they do certain things. There are certain kind of hallmarks of a boy band track, but I think that, like George says, kind of a good song is a good song, and you might do certain things in a boy band track that you wouldn't do in I don't know, a Cheryl track or you know, something more urban. But I don't think we really do anything differently. I don't think we're sort of thinking, well, you're kind of thinking about the demographic that you're writing for, definitely. And actually, that's a good point. When we're writing for female artists, we nearly always have a female top liner in the room, because I think being boys, it's easier for us to write a song for a boy band with, you know, without that kind of lyrics are such a delicate thing, and I think you need a female perspective when you're writing for someone like Little Mix or the Saturdays. You know, someone just to kind of, I don't know, turn the testosterone down a bit. And
hard to get inside the mind of a 20-year-old girl when you're not a 20-year-old girl.
Yeah. That's tricky.
You do see it a lot as well in the industry, where you see people that are similar to the artists not been asked, but employed to do top line. Like, I'm thinking there, just since we're talking about top line, Ester Dean, who would have worked with Stargate, and then they wrote all those songs for Rihanna, which, like, they had a massive run of hits with her, Rude Boy, S&M, and then she went on to do Nicki Minaj Super Bass, which was like smash hit. And like, people used to say they didn't know if Rihanna was actually aping Ester Dean. She's an incredible vocalist in her own right, or whether she was aping Rihanna. Like, one way or another, she was singing songs like she imagined Rihanna would sing the song. Rihanna doesn't write at all, as far as I'm aware. And then she would take the songs. I mean, is that kind of what is best practice?
We always talk about it, because I think when we've worked from its infancy, we're part of that act, and we're as much part of it as sound, because quite often when we've developed acts, we've cultivated the sound, you know, with them, and we've written the songs with them, so we're part of that group. So I think, I definitely think an artist is a part of the team.
And going on to what you're saying about people singing, you know, Ester Dean singing like Rihanna or vice versa, I think that that's a really important thing. I think that when you're pitching songs, you need to bear in mind that most people have very limited imagination as to how that song can be presented. So we'll go so far as to get session singers that sound like the artist.
Gotcha. That's really interesting.
So that it doesn't take that much imagination to go, oh, you know what, that could be really good for Ollie Murs, or, you know, whatever. And I think that, I mean, I know that when Rihanna sang Diamonds, you know, the reason that she sort of sounds a little bit like Sia on it is when you hear the demo and it's great. She sounds brilliant. So I think they just copy each other. It's really hard to, like, when you do a demo and then when you do a demo and the singer's not they just copy the way that it's presented, because that feels right for some. And
also, if you're pitching, labels falling in love with the track as is, with whoever's singing it. So when an artist comes along, if they change it too much, then maybe it won't sound as good as the demo, and you get demo-itis.
I feel like we've pitched right into the middle of like the process, and so if we take a tiny step back for a second to talk about.
Sorry about that.
Well, no, it should happen organically, so it's all good.
It's not how we practice.
It's not how we practice upstairs. We've gone way off script. Let's take a song like, for instance, "Good Girls," which reached the US #1 in iTunes charts, which is like wonderful. 5 Seconds of Summer. So, talk me through the songwriting process there from the beginning, please.
Yeah, we. That track it was 15 days we spent on that track in total in the production. By the time it had actually got taken, with about there's 5 or 6 different arrangements. But we
wrote that with Roy from Scouting for Girls and a guy called Josh Wilkinson, who's really like talented writer, and a friend of ours who we met during the 2020 project. In fact, we met both of those guys doing that project, and they said to us, "We've got this new act on signed to Modest. It's really hush hush, but you know, we think it could be big. Do you guys want to come in and do some songs?" So we met we met the guys and did sessions in like January 2 years ago. And
they'd just flown in, literally the two guys, the first was January the 2nd, and they'd just flown in from Australia. So they were just absolutely shattered. They were only about, at the time, about 16, 17, weren't they?
Yeah, really jet lagged and I can't really remember very much about it because it's one of those where I felt the sessions were actually quite difficult. We weren't sure whether we were nailing it, and maybe it's because the guys were jet lagged.
So jet lagged, you maybe weren't getting a lot back from them.
And they were spread over a few days as well. We did some of them in Roy's studio in Streatham, and then we took bits back to our studio and worked on them separately. It was quite a sort of disjointed process, and I think when that happens, it's even harder to kind of get that feeling of like, oh, is this really, is this a good one? It's difficult.
So just to kind of like strip it back again, did you come with the hook? Did you come with the hook, or did you come with something different?
That was Roy. Roy was sat in
from Scouting for Girls.
Yeah, so he's sat there and he's like, I've got this idea for a title: "Good Girls or Bad Girls That Haven't Been Caught." We were just like, that's
genius
amazing.
lyric, yeah.
And he does that quite a lot. He'll just sort of be sat there and I've got this, I don't know, it might work, this idea, and he'll just hit you with this thing, and you can see why he is who he is. He's just it's just amazing. So he had that, and then they worked up a track with the melody. So I don't think we even did a lot of the top line, or if any of the top line.
No, I don't. Yeah, no.
So sometimes you just kind of stand back and say, right.
Yeah, we do as much
and
as little as needs to happen, I think. So with some of the tracks we wrote probably about 10 songs with 5 songs. Two that ended up on the UK album, and then one that was on an extra one on a US album. And some of them we wrote more, and some of them we wrote less. Some of them we just sat there because we, as track guys, we can just do the track. Yeah. But if it's ever at any point where there's someone struggling, we can.
Yeah, and that was something we were saying earlier in the room. I think, and it's definitely something to bear in mind when you're co-writing is how much or how little of yourself to give, because that's different in every session, And when someone like Roy comes in with like a great idea like that, Good Girls or Bad Girls That Haven't Been Caught, it's just like sold. That's so good.
So you all go for that immediately.
And then you have to just facilitate that. You have to recognize a great idea and then facilitate what needs to happen to make that, to turn it into a track that resembles that does justice to the idea. I think that's really, really important part of writing production, and not getting in the way of a good idea just because you didn't come up with it, or tweaking the melody needlessly because you feel like you didn't do enough on it. If it's good, it's good, and you just have to trust your gut and make sure you don't stuff it up.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. We had Jake Gosling here recently, who did Plus and Multiply with Ed Sheeran, amongst other things, and we were talking about like happy sessions, and and his attitude was, look, ego has to go out the window, agendas have to go out the window, everything is about what's happening in the room. And I was kind of sort of poking him and saying, what about do things like royalty splits and stuff like that start coming into your mind? Because what if you don't do anything on the track? Do you start to worry then, I haven't done anything, so I'm not going to get paid?
That's what I was saying upstairs, is that then I think the relationships with the guys that you work with really comes into play, and it's why you find that a lot of people work with the same people, because it's the one thing, I think for me, it's the most awkward thing in the whole of what we do, is trying to sort out splits. No one wants to talk about it. Management say, can you talk about it in the room before you start?
Up front.
No, we can't. Of course we can't. Yeah, so right guys, this is how we're going to do it. It's just not going to work. And then you go to sessions in America, and we've sat in sessions in America where they've recorded, they've got a microphone running the whole time in a session, so that if it ever goes to court, I suppose they can then go, actually you didn't do that, you're lying. So you're right. Actually, I think the key is to work with guys that you trust. Have a sort of, we have a formula that we have, and at the end of the day, like I said before, the best idea has to win, and if the best idea wins, then everybody wins.
I think the other thing to remember with splits and like getting into the nitty gritty of who does what in a session, I think that it's so hard to quantify, because you could sit there and literally do nothing, stay absolutely silent, apart from come up with maybe one word. I don't know, yesterday. You know, if you were like, how about calling it yesterday? And then you start with yesterday. And, you know, that
Well, John Lennon got half the royalty there. You know what I'm saying?
But it transforms the track. You know, one idea like that, or you know, why don't we make the verse the chorus, or something like that? It could be just one stupid idea, and who's to say that that's not as valuable a contribution to the track as you know, writing the lyric. You know, it's really difficult to quantify it, and I don't think it should be quantified. I think that when you do sessions with people, if there's 3 people in the room, it should be a 3-way split. That's how it should be.
Is 3 the magic number?
Well, whatever there is. If there's 5 in the room, there should be a 5-way split.
Nice. See what you did there. Yeah, actually, we when we were working with Cheryl, we told her that obviously being the triangle, the reason why we are triangles.
Oh, I just got that.
There's 2 of us.
Oh, penny has dropped.
And
okay.
And the artist forms the triangle. And she used it. She said it in an interview on radio. She said, "Yeah, worked with these guys, and they're a triangle, and the artist makes up the triangle." So
it's amazing, like when you offer somebody like an image, a shape, like it's right back to school. Then you carry that away, and then I like it. It's very good.
And we're actually called Red Triangle. Quite proud of this, because I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Red Triangle, just off the west coast of America. It's where the most amount of great white shark attacks happen, and everyone knows that the music industry is full of sharks. So that's what it is. And we love sharks, bizarrely.
It's just cleverer and cleverer. This is I'm very impressed.
His idea.
50% split there. I'm sure, though.
Always.
always. So I said 3 is the magic number. I actually genuinely didn't realize that. But you are in a session. I mean, generally speaking, when you have 3 people and not necessarily the artist there, do you immediately start thinking with Roy or whoever it might be, right, this is the song for X? Or have you begun with a brief at the start anyway that you've been writing for X?
It really varies. I think increasingly as we do it, I think that you get your best work when you're not thinking too hard about is this going to be a song for so-and-so. You just all going with the flow and getting into an idea. And when that happens, you end up with a great song, and then loads of people want to take it. And I think that or, you know, hopefully. But I think that's more important than following brief. But I think briefs, people talk badly of briefs because they're it doesn't feel right, but they are useful because you need to know what kind of lane an artist's in. Yeah. You know, there's One Direction there's certain tracks that One Direction just aren't going to do. And so you kind of need to know, you know, what the general kind of picture is. But at the same time, I think if you worry too much about the details, you can't see the wood for the trees. You need to, you know, take a step back and just make sure you've got a great idea and work on that.
I mean, I would say a lot of people in this room would write to briefs. You know, I'd say that's probably the most predominant thing that songwriters are, especially at, we'll say, the beginning stages, or, you know, in the early stages of anybody's career, you're writing a lot to briefs. I mean, from your point of view, like, what are the things that the pitfalls that you would watch out for when you get a brief?
The pitfalls are being too close to the brief. So, like, if they say we're looking for, like, Ace of Base meets, I don't know, yeah, something like that, and then picking, you know, the big Ace of Base hit and basically kind of like nicking it and making it sound too close. But do you know what I mean?
You wouldn't do that, George.
Making it sound too close is the number one pitfall, because when people say that that's what they want, they don't actually mean that. They mean that something in that kind of lane. And I think that when we first started, we were probably guilty of a bit of that, where you'd go too close to it. And
we've had it knocked back more than one occasion where it's been too close to the brief, and that really hurts, because it's sort of, okay, we did what we were supposed to do, yeah. But then the point is, it's got to be different.
Something that our management pointed out to us, I think is really valuable, actually. It is the one bad thing about briefs is that they have to be referencing old tracks. because you know, you can't write a brief of a song that hasn't been written yet. So you're kind of referencing tracks that are already out there and past. And when A&Rs and artists are sort of looking for songs, they don't want things that sound like something that's happened in the past. They, you know, like they want it to sound like a hit, but they want it to be fresh and original. And so I think that's the real challenge: is how do you put a 2016 slant on it? You know, how do you make it sound like kind of like the brief, but actually totally different, something fresh and new? And that's really hard. It's really hard to get it right all the time, and we definitely don't.
I think one of the best briefs we had and the worst briefs we had this year was an A&R man said it needs to be contemporary and in the zone. That was it. But it's exactly what he meant. That's exactly what he meant.
But in many ways, that's a really good brief, because you know exactly what he means.
I want a hit record, you know, and it needs to sound fresh and fine. We like that because it's what they're all looking for at the end of the day. It's what all bands are looking for.
That is literally, as you say, write me a hit.
Yeah.
Who would write anything other than is contemporary and in the zone if they're looking for a hit record?
Yeah.
So that, as you said, that's kind of the. Do you know when you have written like to get excited when you've like?
Yeah,
oh shit,
I think you do.
We've written a hit. That's a hit.
You do. I think we always say if we both like it, then then we know we're onto something really good, because we're quite super critical of each other's ideas as much as our own. So if we're both sort of at the end of the day, and we both know it as well, if we're printing a track, we both know if it's not hit the mark as well, and you can feel it in the room, and it's not good. You know, you sort of.
But I think in terms of navigation, like one of the great things about having two people is there's two people editing the ideas, and that can be really infuriating sometimes, particularly when your ideas are getting knocked back. But it's really important, because if both of us like it, it's more likely that a wider audience are going to like it than if just one of us likes it. And I think that in terms of navigating your way to a great song, the only thing you have is to trust your gut. That's literally all there is, because it's a personal taste thing. Who's to say that one thing's right and one thing's wrong? It's really, really difficult. But if your gut tells you it's not a hit, it probably isn't. You have to just. Would
you give it a day? Would you say, well, it might be. I'm going to let that percolate and come back in a day?
Sometimes it's when one of us, usually it's when one of us doesn't like it and the other one's very into it, and then you start. Yeah. Or when someone that you respect or a label says, yeah, we really like that, you go, yeah, I really like that too.
But you really might have a difficult day. Like you're human, and people just that you have a bad day sometimes, and you have a difficult day, and it's like, I'm not really sure we got it, and you get a scratch vocal down and a rough track, and you go home a bit kind of bummed out, and you come back to it in the morning, you're like, this is great, and actually all that needs to happen now is we need to change the drums here, and then and just silly things like that can just suddenly make a massive difference. So I think it's important not to lose heart on things just because they instantly don't feel right. Sometimes we struggle for hours to get it.
I'm sure lots of people have done demos and come back the next day and thought, shit, that's really good actually. And when they thought the first day, no, that didn't really work. So I mean,
and vice versa, we've done that.
Yeah.
You come back the next day, what were we smoking last night?
The coin has two sides. Again, something that I was reading about Stargate, because I was just sort of, they'd come up during the week, and they're these two Norwegian guys that have written loads and loads of hits.
Unbelievable, yeah. Gods.
They are, yeah. And they talk about the difference between a hit, which they've written shitloads of, and a smash, which is like, da-da-da. Yeah,
we haven't written that yet.
The holy grail, you know. So, and when they write a smash, like, they really jealously protect that. It's not like, I'm sorry, but that is going to a Katy Perry, or that's going to somebody that's going to make it sell it many, many times, and it's going to be worldwide.
And that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then if they're doing that, then everybody starts to believe that it is. And someone like Stargate, they do believe it, you know. It's harder for us folk to sort of do that, because we haven't had the track record.
But if you have a number one, like, you know, and if you have like a hit with, you know, 5 Seconds of Summer, if you have a hit with Union J, if you have a hit with Cheryl, you know, you keep on taking another step on the ladder. That's basically it, isn't it, in a nutshell?
Definitely.
I think this is a really interesting point, because like one of the difficulties about being a creative person is nothing's ever really good enough. And when I, you know, if I look at where we are now, I'm quite proud of it. But it's not. I feel like, oh, you know, we just like you were saying there, we haven't had a smash. You know, we've had a few like hits or little hits, or do you know what I mean? And I think it's really difficult to keep perspective on where you are without getting complacent, or like I think that you've always got to be striving for something a bit better, and in many ways that kind of means that you're never really happy with what you've done.
It's interesting because like the idea of a smash is like it feels to me like an all-time great hit record that we'll be talking about in 10 years, maybe. Some like there's been smashes like Swedish House Mafia openly admit no one will listen to our music in 10 years. It's gone. It's of a time. It's contemporary and in the zone, and then it's gone. Like if you write a truly great song, like, and I'm not talking Cole Porter here, but like a truly great song, do you feel that like the industry is there, that you will take it to somebody who could make it a hit? Like, have you the opportunity when you're at your stage? As you say, you guys have had hits, but you haven't had a smash. Mm-hmm. If you write a smash, is the structure there to take it to that level?
I think almost. I think it's still very difficult to. I think we might have already done it. That's the thing. That's the sort of exciting thing about what we do. Is that we might have already written the smash that just needs somebody to go and sort of put it in on that platform. But I think the process of trying to get it to those people, it's just always very difficult. I think it's
but you raise a really good point, because I think that is a real struggle in the industry. There's so many gatekeepers, so many people who they hold the key to you getting a song to a certain artist. Do you get it to the manager? Do you get it to the artist? Do you get it to the A&R person? And how do you get it there? I think that is really difficult, and I think it's still absolutely a hustle. And we're really lucky with our management. We're really lucky with our publisher, and they all do, a great job at sort of being in people's faces with our work. But the trouble is we're not at a level where we're going to be walking into the next Rihanna thing. It's really difficult. Okay.
Well, there's a lot of people in this room that are thinking, I've got a song for X. It could be anybody from the Coronas, who are an emerging Irish band. They have been emerging for a long time, but they've signed a big deal with Ireland. So it could be local, ostensibly local in Ireland, or it could be Rihanna, Katy Perry, whoever it is. I mean, when you write a song and you've got the people that you're working with now, the people that you have worked with, the people that you will work with, how do you go about trying to make that connection? Do you send an email to the manager and go, hey, we've done this, what do you reckon?
It's all a lot of it is through the management and the publishers. With the Cheryl stuff, we were in a session with her, and she was talking about a song that she'd lost. Someone else had taken a song away from her, and she was saying that she loved the song because of this, that, and the other. And I'm sort of sat there going, "We've got a song like that. We've got a song like this." But how do you do it? It's sort of. It's very awkward to sort of say to someone, "Oh, it's really embarrassing." For some reason, and especially when it's your own work, it's much harder to sort of say, "Check this out, I did this," than it is to say, "Oh, that person over there has written a really good song. You should listen to that." And so, I basically put my headphones on her and said, "I've got a track. I'd love you to listen to it. Like, just listen to it," and put it on her, and then left the room.
You touched her hair, like.
I know. I think she had a shower pretty quick. I came back in, and she loved it, and that sort of set us off onto. I don't know. It changed the dynamic between us and Cheryl, where she was actually listening to songs. She wanted to hear more of what we'd done.
Wow. So she might have been just a little bit passive in the session until that moment.
I think we were writing a different song.
Yeah,
it was a totally different thing that we were doing, and we'd just pause for a bit just to chat about other stuff and how things were going, and quite often that's like the most valuable bit of the session, because you might have an idea for maybe not that song but a different song or whatever during that, and so it's kind of a bit serendipitous, but you do need your you need to be ready for your luck, but you definitely need a bit of luck as well. Like,
luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
very good, very good.
Confucius. Yeah.
That's his as well.
On a more practical note, like it kind of like something that is really achievable. We've talked a lot about our managers, and I think that's actually a really, I can't give them enough credit for helping us. If we've had any success, they have had an equal role in crafting it as much as we have, because it's all very well having a song, writing a song, and knowing that it's good. You've got to get that song to marketplace somehow, and good management and good publishers can do that for you, and that's something that's really important.
How did you meet your manager then?
We've been through some less good ones as well. I mean, we met them because they were, Ross was a
scout at
yeah,
Polydor.
scout at Polydor, and we went for a meeting with him, and we just got on very well with him, and he just started putting us in sessions when we knew nobody, and we weren't doing a lot of sessions, and he was putting our name up there, and he was taking a risk at the end of the day. And then when we came out of one management deal, he was sort of there and said, "Hey guys, why don't we give this a go?" And we were very skeptical, because it's tough. You always hear when you're doing anything, when you're trying to be an artist, when you're trying to be anything in music, you always hear don't just sign anything, don't just end up in a bad management contract. And we've been there.
But that's really important, because I think the other thing is when you're struggling to get noticed, if anybody pays interest in you, you're kind of like, oh, that's great, that's really good. This must be the manager for me, because they're the ones that actually are returning my emails. And it's really easy to say, particularly with hindsight, but really hard at the time not to fall into that trap of just taking the first thing that comes along, because it can really hold your career back, having the wrong manager. They just can't open doors that need to be opened, and that's really important.
It's a classic relationship pitfall, full stop, because, it's the old, he may not be Mr. Right, but he's Mr. Right now,
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm saying, ladies? Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, good stuff. So, this is taking a different turn. This is very interesting. If you look at, obviously, your career to date, and you've had, I feel like the graph is going this way. You guys, you're growing all the time. And then, like we mentioned, Cheryl, there 7 songs written on her album, but you're involved in production on 3 more. So 10 in total. Like, she must love your stuff. Like, I mean, from that moment where she put the headphones on and you're already in the session anyway.
Well, I think we were really, I've said it before, but we were really lucky with Cheryl. We were really lucky on a number of fronts. Firstly, we were lucky that she's the type of person that gives, she said it to us actually in the session. She's like, if I like a dress, I'll wear the dress. It doesn't have to be like by a designer that's, well known. If I like that dress, I'll wear a dress. And I think, and she's very similar to that with her music. She falls in love with songs, particularly lyrics that kind of speak to her, and she's prepared to put her. And also, she has the kind of luxury of being able to do it because she's such an established brand. It doesn't matter so much for her that she has established names kind of propping it up. She doesn't need propping up. She chooses what she likes, and we were very lucky to be on the receiving end of that.
We were also massively in debt to A&R guy at Polydor, who we'd had meetings with over the years, and he just said, "I really like what you guys are doing, but I just don't have anything for it." And he set the session up. And credit to Cheryl, because we were nobody, and she still took the session with us. But he then put his neck on the line, putting us in that session.
When was that? Was that last year? Was that 14?
I can't even remember.
Because the album was released
beginning of this year.
January, yeah.
Beginning of this
year.
Yeah.
And he then came down to the session, introduced us, and we owe him a lot because he put us in that position that we could sort of benefit from.
But actually, it's really interesting, like talking about it, because when you we just sort of take it for granted. But like as we've been sort of talking about, I've been thinking about the importance of all these little chance meetings and the networking, and I think that stuff like this is really, really important. Like going and meeting people, going and meeting A&Rs, meeting managers, even if nothing comes of it initially. Like when I think back to, you know, all the lucky moments that we've had, they've all happened because we've met people or chatted to people that, you know, just chance meetings, and that's massively important, the networking side of it, I think.
So we've done the networking, we've talked about some of the craft, and we've talked about the process itself. So I'm always kind of like trying to gauge the room when we do these about how Anoraki or geary the people are, you know, how interested in the actual production tools that you use as well. But let's talk about Beach Studios, which is in Christchurch, not in New Zealand, but in Dorset. So Dorset, just give me the geographical.
It's the Isle of, you know, the Isle of Wight?
Yeah.
So if you're on the left-hand side of the Isle of Wight, basically directly up, and it's on the coast.
Okay.
And we possibly shouldn't have done what we did. We bought a sort of derelict 2,500 square foot barn at a time when pretty much every big studio in the country was going out of business, and decided to build a big studio because we wanted a huge live room, and we wanted 2 studios. We bought the place. We then couldn't get planning permission for it for a year because they didn't want us to change it from a derelict barn into a recording studio. The whole thing was riddled with woodworm. Like, it was a unbelievably stressful and crazy project that sort of ended up giving us our dream studio. And it's massive. It's out of London, which is really difficult because trying to get people out of London's always...
That's why I want to know the geography. Was like, is it difficult to get people down to the south coast?
It is. We're lucky with... we were talking about this the other day because when we first did it, we weren't working with anybody with any profile. And my dad was sort of going, you know what's brilliant is that there's a hotel next door. It's a crazy expensive hotel. He said, so when you've got your high profile people, they can just stay at the hotel. I was thinking, well, David, pie in the sky, brilliant.
Put it on the tab.
Yeah. Well, I can remember, I can vividly remember because we had a meeting with the hotel manager, and George's dad was bigging us up, going, yeah, of course they'll have all the big stars here. And I was kind of going, oh, I'm not sure about that.
Having worked with none ever.
And it was almost like, if you build it, they will come. It literally was like that. But I think that is part of it. Is we were visualizing something grand, and it was a bit crazy, but we did it, and sure enough, it panned out. And I think that if you think big and you sort of expect things to work out, more often than not, they do.
What year did you start the build? What year did you buy the barn?
We probably bought it in 2010.
I think,
yeah.
10. So then another year of planning.
Couple of years building.
18. It took about 2 years to build it.
And conversion then.
Yeah, and massive teething problems.
I can imagine turning a barn into a functioning
the whole thing had
recording studio.
The whole thing had woodworm. We didn't even really know, so we were told just to spray it with something, and which cost about $2,000 to spray it. And then the guy went, "Oh no, that hasn't helped." So we're gonna have to now rebuild
it.
It
nearly blew down. The thing nearly blew down in the wind.
Yeah, my dad and I went down there one night because we had all those sort of high winds around whenever it was, and we went down there with some stakes and some ratchets, whatever you call them, to basically secure this thing because we were worried the whole thing was going to fall down. And
but it's been so crucial to our work. It's kind of, because it's our space and we built it the kind of studio that we would like to work in. So it's got a really we were talking about vibe and the vibe of a session, and it's got a really laid back kind of beachy feel, and it makes people feel like they're on holiday, not in a recording studio.
It sounds amazing.
And that's a really good, that's such a massive kind of leg up for starting a session.
Yeah. Because people want away from the hustle and bustle as well when they come to songwriting, don't they?
I think the thing was people were saying to us at the time, it was our management at the time, you're nuts. There's something itis, geography-itis or something like that.
Denial or something.
Location denial.
Location denial, that was it.
And yeah, okay, it's an hour and a half out of London, but the labels will send people anywhere. They go to Denmark, you know. If you're actually if you're producing the goods, then people will be there. And if you're not, then why are we doing this anyway?
Michael Jackson came to Grouse Lodge, which is in Westmeath, right in the middle of Ireland. It's a famous example in this country.
That's an amazing studio, though.
Yeah, it's an incredible in the middle of sorry, Westmead people here, if there's anybody in, but it is technically. Was I'm from Leitrim? I'm from
He
very
did
remote
say
area. I
that
can
New
say
York
this.
was on the west coast of America
I did.
before we came
I'm
out.
I'm a bit confused about west and east, but yeah. So yeah, you were bringing people to a place that was a little bit removed, like Michael Jackson, which would have been nice as well.
He would have, yeah, that would have been good. Yeah,
It's something different for them as well. So for the people that come down from town, they like the artists. They live really kind of hectic lives, and it's because it is so far removed from that. Like there's not even very good mobile signal, so it's kind of like everything else shuts down, and you can just concentrate on doing what you're there to do, write the songs and relax. And I think having a relaxed sort of ambience in a session is really, really important, because you're never going to do good work if you're kind of like stressed out, or only half of you is there because you're checking your phone the whole time. It's
in the summer we've got the beach about 5 minutes walk away, and in the winter we've got a log fire. So you sit there it's bliss. It's lovely. It's heaven.
You could do breaks away as well as recordings. You're selling this so well. Without going into all your gear, do you want to talk to me about maybe your favorite piece of gear? Would that be
I love
good?
talking about gear.
Yeah, okay.
Gear.
George's. Get comfortable.
When we first, sorry, but just before we start, when we first went into business, my sole job was to stop him buying gear. It was just any bit of money that any came through. It's like, we need this new pre, we need this, we need a 1608.
Thing is, though, right? You wouldn't expect a plumber to turn up without any tools.
Yeah, of course.
And when you're writer-producers,
Yep.
there are a few tools that, if they're not essential, they make your life a hell of a lot easier. And so I think definitely my favorite bit of gear is my Pro Tools rig, because if you think about the power that's contained in that, everybody sort of talks about, like, imagine if the Beatles had Pro Tools, what would their albums have sounded like? Because it's so unbelievable what you can do with it. And even with just an M-Box and the free plugins, you can make a hit record. You do not need... You might need.
You
like
truly
a
believe
micro.
that
Yeah,
you can do that?
I honestly do. And the reason I say it is because I mixed Sandy's album in 2006 purely using DigiDesign plugins, because I didn't have any good plugins. So I did it all with just the stock EQs and bits and bobs.
So you just alluded to that once before, but that was the Sandy Thom album that she released through MySpace. That was that.
Yeah, that one.
That was that album. So that was an interesting project to be part of, obviously.
Really interesting project, yeah. I mean,
done on a shoestring.
Yeah, a really tiny budget, and I took it at the time because my band wasn't on tour. It's January, nothing ever happens in January, and her manager, he's such a character, was like, do you want to do this album? And I was kind of like, well, I suppose, yeah. What's the budget? And it was literally tiny. But he's like, but you know what? I'll give you a royalty on it. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that'll come in useful when she sells 3 records or whatever it was. And it went on to sell 1.6 million records, and it was one of the...
And you had some points.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where I had to pinch myself. He called me up one day, and I can't remember. I was doing something with the band. Oh, it was a Download Festival, so it was quite a big day for the band kind of thing. So I was on a bit of a high anyway. And he was like, I need your bank account details. And I was like, what for? And he's like, you got royalties. I was like, you're kidding me. And I didn't even know it was #1. He's like, it's gone to #1. So that kind of thing is that's.
So that's like punk rocker, flower in your hair.
Yeah, that was the one track I didn't do actually.
Okay.
I produced the entire
What a
rest
dickhead.
of the album apart from that one. But
Okay.
that was a really good learning experience, because I wasn't involved in any of the writing. There were these other guys who were mates with Sandy who'd done most of the writing. And so it's like a production thing, and I was very detached from it. Do you know what I mean? Because I was sort of I felt like I was just sort of doing a job. But I think sometimes those ones are really good for you. They're really good learning experiences. It wasn't really my kind of music. It was a bit folky, but it's really interesting working on those projects, because you get a sense for something that I was like, oh, this is quite good. I'm quite enjoying this. It's not my normal thing. And then you don't realize anything's going to happen, and all of a sudden, it's massive. And I think that's something to bear in mind for the sort of production side of it. It literally was done on stock Pro Tools. There's nothing fancy at all. I had one nice preamp, a Focusrite Red Pre, and one nice mic. So everything that came in sounded quite nice, but it's just the stock plugins. And I like to think, in spite of my gear addiction, that we've kind of taken that attitude forwards. You don't need, sometimes you can have too many tools.
What I'm most proud of is just our vocal chain, because we've been, I think vocals are so important. Okay. And I think so many people don't see the importance of the vocal. You know, it's like, it's what most people listen to. Most people, my girlfriend can't hear the difference in a different snare in a track, but she'll be able to tell if the vocal sounds crap. And it's, and because we work with, well, we try to work a lot with the American guys, their vocal chain, their vocals are always unbelievable, and you got to put yourselves up there, you know.
What marks them out?
I think it's attention to detail, plus they've always got amazing gear. It's always the same. It's always a Neve 1073 into a CL1B with some sort of Telefunken U84. Don't know what that means.
Rick, what gear are you using for vocals?
We have a Neve 1073 preamp, and that thing, I think that's, if you're going to spend some money on, if you're going to splash your cash on a bit of gear, get yourself a Neve preamp. Because the reason I say it is we're so accustomed to hearing vocals that are on a Neve preamp that it's almost like it doesn't really sound like a hit vocal if it hasn't gone through one. I think, anyway. So I you know, that's like a massive stepping stone up, just right there, just having that one thing. And
still on gear, and promise though, last gear question. Favorite plugin, or is there anything that you're getting a lot of use out of at the minute? Paid for or free?
The Sonox stuff.
I absolutely love, my Desert Island plugin is the Sonox EQ, because it's so, it just does exactly what it's supposed to do. It doesn't color it at all. It just, you can carve things up, and you can tighten your whole mix up. You can really shape and sculpt the sounds the way you want them without adding any artifacts. I think it's incredible, and
it's on pretty much everything we've ever done multiple times.
I don't think I could mix without it anymore. It's so useful. Just the filters, actually, they're the most, you know, they're incredible filters.
That's the Sonox EQ.
Sonox EQ, yeah.
Okay. I've got my last area I want to talk to you about. We've kind of covered it already, so I do want to open the floor as well. I'm sure there's people with questions. It's about the business, I suppose. We've talked about some of the split and the kind of how delicate that can be. Yeah, okay. But I mean, from your point of view, when you're fostering new business, like you guys are obviously fostering new business every day. Like you did it probably this week, and you'll do it next week as well. What's your approach? Like who are you looking for? We kind of mentioned managers. Is that the main approach for Red Triangle?
You know what? I think that having like you know, big managers up, I think there's so much that you can do yourself, and that we still do. And I think it's really important to take to have a sense of hustle about you at all times. You know, like before we had good management, George was managing us. I call him the rainmaker. George can make things happen. And, you know, so when we were picking our management, we wanted managers that would take that to another level. But George still does loads and loads of that stuff. Networking, talking to people on the phone, finding out what's going on, who's doing what projects. You know, it's so important.
So even when you get your manager, you do not sit in your ass wait things to happen?
The problem is you can, and then one day you fall out with the manager, and you won't know anybody, and you'll be out of the loop. You got to try and keep yourself, you know, active, and you know, where we don't do nearly enough meetings. Because we're very busy, so we're going up to London because it's so far away. I mean, God, who would have a studio outside of London? But because it's so far away, it's quite difficult to actually get up there. But when we do, we always, without fail, will come out of London and say, we need to go to London more. We need to do more meetings. And when we were working in LA a couple of weeks ago, and we were in sessions, and then because there's this amazing, if you ever get a chance to go and work out there, don't just do it. Just go. But because there's an amazing sort of hub of energy, but then all the labels are really close as well. So you can literally nip out and go and meet X label for a meeting, and then meetings in America are amazing anyway, because the meetings are always brilliant, and then nothing ever happens after them. But you always come out going, that was amazing.
I think it's like something going back to management and the kind of like the hustly side of it. Something that I was talking about Pensado's Place. So we watched that. Something that I picked up on Pensado's Place was Dave Pensado said, and it's really, really important. He said you can only have a manager if you've got something to manage. And how do you have something to manage? You have to create that opportunity for yourself. So in the early days, you have to be as proactive as you possibly can be to give yourself, something to manage, because then a manager can take that on, take it to the next level. But if you've got nothing under your belt, no songs that people want, no productions that are sounding good that you can present to people, how can you expect a manager to take you on? Because there's nothing there for them to do. You have to create those first steps, and they're really they're tough steps. But you have to kind of create them for yourself, and then let a manager.
We did everything when we first started. When I first started working with Rick, there wasn't anything we wouldn't do. We'd work with everybody, and none of it was paid. We were just working for nothing because we had to create something. There had to
be
something.
In the beach
no,
studio.
No, this is before the beach. So
wow.
This is massively important because it's one of the in business terms. We changed business model massively from basically us having a recording studio and being solely producers to going into songwriting and being writer-producers, and that's a huge difference. But you're used to getting paid for productions that it's other people's work, and that's the end of it. But then if you don't have any songs, you can't be a writer-producer. So we then had to spend we were talking about those years, 2009 to 12. That's what we were doing. We were writing, doing things on spec. We would just hustling, literally sending people backing tracks. If someone sent us like a vocal, we'd build an entire track for it, and we'd work till 4 a.m. doing it because we just needed to give ourselves something. You need to have something so that you can take it on to the next level, and that is really, really important, like vital.
And at this stage, obviously, we've talked about a lot of the artists that you've worked with and are working with. What's next? What new business? Who are we hustling next?
We had a meeting with our publishers last week, and it was we're trying to sort of get out into other territories. Obviously America, there's a tiny little spark happening over there because of 5 Seconds of Summer. As far as we're concerned, they're doing amazingly well.
Yep.
And my sister. But then it's all about trying to find other territories and see if we can.
I think if you think too hard about the music industry, you can literally scare yourself shitless, because like you're so involved in the project that you get to the end of it, you're like, what are we going to do now? And like I still have that feeling like, what's coming next? You don't know, you really don't, but something always turns up. You just.
But hustlers always have plates spinning. You guys have plates spinning.
That's true. But you have to have that attitude that you're only as good as your last record.
Yeah.
Like, what's next? Yeah. And sure enough, things do turn up. But you can't plan too far ahead, I don't think, because otherwise you're just too frightening.
Insecurity in the music industry, bombshell.
Yeah, it's really,
no, I think we all, to some level, you need to be able to thrive on the kind of uncertainty, I suppose, and what might or might not happen. Guys, absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I there's so much to take away there. Would you please put your hands together?
Thank you very much. Thanks.
For Rick Parkhouse and George Tizzard.